poderíamos ir avançando. No total temos 180 registros que irão entrar.
Então você dir-me quando eu devo começar a falar.
Eu avançava já, José Miguel. Consoante.
Well,
avançaria agora, José Miguel.
Good morning, good afternoon, and even good night. We are coming from so different jurisdictions all around the world. Therefore, it's important to clarify this. First of all, thank you very much, Bruno, for your kind invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be trying to moderate so distinguished practitioners as all. Congratulations for the success. We have speakers coming from 4 different continents. We have more than 180 participants coming from 5 continents. And investment protection dispute resolution, ISDS, is in the center stage of international discussions related to the international order and its submission to the rule of law. Being myself an international arbitrator active on ISDS, I look forward for hearing from all of you what would illuminate me and all the other participants, because each one of you is a leading name in Portuguese-speaking countries and also in international arena. For the efficiency and expediency, I just referred that you are coming from Brazil, Macau, Angola, Moçambique, Cabo Verde, and Portugal. And I will not present each one of you as it will take too much time. That is much more necessary for the discussions. And now, trust me, they will help us to navigate this complex set of issues. And now, Mr. João Dono, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It depends on where you are in this moment. Bruno, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be with you, with Miguel Judas, and also with my colleagues. Let's share my screen. Okay, let's go. Today, we will speak about Portuguese-speaking countries' investment dispute arbitration. I will focus in some aspects that I think is very important. As I just have 10 until 20 minutes, I will focus in main aspects. I choose just 4 key aspects of investment arbitration. But I think it's better to start with.
I'm back here now. Sorry.
Okay. It's better to start with a very simple definition about investment arbitration. Investment arbitration is arbitration involving states and private parties. This is very important. And what is about? It's about arbitration to solve conflicts or disputes arising from investment. Okay, the main purpose of this kind of arbitration is to solve conflicts between states and private states. So how can you solve this conflict? As you know, arbitration is one of the better ways to solve conflicts between the parties. But arbitration has as a base consent. The party has to consent to go to arbitration. And it may be institutional or it may be ad hoc arbitration. So, as you know, country like Angola and Moçambique, also Cabo Verde, need a foreign investment. But it's very important to a foreign investment to feel that in case of the conflict, they will have a fair and impartial resolution. So how can we achieve this goal? One of the ways to achieve this goal is by the International Center for the Settlement Investment Dispute, known as ICSID. So the main purpose of ICSID is to solve conflicts and promote the investor. Looking for my second key. My second key is the jurisdiction. And I use this Latin word, complex word, but I will try to explain in a very simple way. To start arbitration, exceed arbitration, you need a ratio voluntatis, ratio material, ratio personae, and ratio temporis. We can explain this word by make the following question. In what condition, about what, and who, and when we can have the investment arbitration? As I said before, arbitration requires a consent. The parties cannot be obligated to go to arbitration. So the voluntatis, the consent, is the first point. The second point is very important, and maybe sometimes is a $1 million question. We have a lot of arbitration, a lot of kind of question, but in investment arbitration is the arbitration arising from an investment. But the meaning of investment is sometimes complex. So sometimes we can find in the BIT the definition about what is investment. Who can be part in this kind of investment arbitration? As I said in the beginning, we have in one hand a state, a host state, a state who received the investment. And the other hand, we have the investor who made the investment. And if they want to go to exceed arbitration, it's important that the both states, the host states, and the state from the nationality form of the investor, they have to be contracting members of New York Convention. This is the fourth point to analyze the jurisdiction of ICSID. Looking for my third key, the consent. Being part of the Washington Convention is not enough to start arbitration behind in ICSID Convention, because we need a double consent. The state has to be a contract state, but it's not enough. The parties, state and investor, have to give their consent. And how they give it? They can give their consent in two ways. First, sometimes we have a state contract, an investment agreement between state and investor. And we can have a clause in the contract that impose or oblige the parties to start arbitration in exceed arbitration. Sometimes we have BAT between states. Normally, this kind of BAT define what you can consider the investment and the way to solve conflict. And the arbitration of exceed is one of them. Sometimes they give the investor the option to choose between ad hoc arbitration, national arbitration, international arbitration, even ICC arbitration. And then another option, sometimes as a country like us need the investment, the foreign investment, we have a national investment law that sometimes has a clause that give the investor the option to go to invest to the investment application. But normally they give several options, and the investment application is one of them. Moving forward, my last key is the recognition and enforcement of the award. As you know, in the international arbitration, you use the New York Convention for enforce the award. But the Ocean Convention, Exceed Convention, also regulates the recognition and enforcement award. And with this interpretation, we have a final and binding award. We know that under the New York Convention, a state can refuse in certain conditions, normally allegate the public policy, they can refuse the enforcement. I think it's easier to enforce awards under the Exceed Convention. I want to conclude my presentation by giving a very brief overview about Angola. First of all, I want to say that Angola approved the private investment law, okay, that regulates the investor rights. And Angola signed also several BATs. And Angola is also ratified the Exceed Convention in October 2022. And Angola is also part of the New York Convention. We can see here that Angola signed several BATs, 20 at least. Looking into this BAT, we can see that normally Angola gives the investor the possibility to choose the way to solve conflict, even national arbitration, even international arbitration, even exceed arbitration or ICC arbitration. As Angola is no contracted state, if an investor makes an investment in Angola and this state is also the contracting member of the Exceed Convention, they can solve the conflict by Exceed Convention or Washington convention. I think in this moment, you can say that Angola wants to attract more investment, and one of the better way to do that is show the world that they can opt for the investment arbitration that is safe to invest in Angola, that Angola respects investor rights, and by this point, after looking of that, I will be wait for the question, and I think is all for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, João. You have been outstanding, and you managed to do it within the time limit that I'm forced to impose to each one of you for the benefit of all of us. Then now I give the floor to Demetrio Manjate, that will be working and keep speaking about this first approach to investment protection. You have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. I believe that you can hear me properly. Can you hear me and see me? Okay, thanks a lot. I want to start by apologizing. I had some internet glitches at the beginning. That's why I suddenly disappeared. But I'm here, and I thank God for this opportunity. I'm overjoyed to be part of this panel with my learned colleagues, and to have the attendance of everyone who is attending this seminar. So my objective or my goal is to bring some aspects, some general aspects regarding the characterization of investment arbitration, and my approach will be based on a comparison with commercial arbitration. I'm happy that my colleague João Dono has gone ahead of me, because then I can focus on some aspects that I think they need to be enhanced regarding this issue. Regarding the definition, I won't take time on this. I think the definition that has been provided by João Dono is enough. So I'll move forward. What is the difference between investment arbitration or investor stages to settlement and commercial arbitration? If we look at the parties involved, in investment arbitration, we'll have a foreign investor against the host state, or the host state against the foreign investor. While in the commercial arbitration, what we have, or what we'll have, is parties that are part to a contract. They may have a dispute, and they submit the dispute to arbitration. Regarding the type of claims, in commercial arbitration has mentioned that disputes will arise out of contract, so there will be a breach of a contractual obligation. In investment arbitration, what we'll have, we can have treaty claims that are those that arise out of a breach of a bilateral or multilateral investment treaty. We can have as well contractual claims that are those that arise out of a breach of an obligation that is contained in an international investment agreement, as mentioned by my colleague. If we look at the intervention of a state, or a state has a part of international arbitration, whether in investment arbitration or in commercial arbitration, it's important to enhance and to say that the state may be part of commercial arbitration as well as part of the investment arbitration. The difference will be that in commercial arbitration, or when a state is part of commercial arbitration, what may have happened is that the state has breached a contract that has been signed with the investor in the private capacity of the state. While in investment arbitration, when the investor conducts his investment, the state keeps its immunity or sovereignty capacity. If we look at the treaty claims we may have, they may be the breach of the umbrella clause, expropriation without fair compensation, unfair and unequal treatment, arbitrary measures, breach of national and most favored nation treatment. All these clauses generally will be provided in a bilateral investment treaty. Conscious of time, I won't go deep in any of them, but I'll be available to take questions for this. So regarding the instrument of international law, I will just list those I think that are the most important, some of which have already been referred to by my land colleague, João Dono. The first one is the Exit Convention on the settlement of investment disputes between states and nations of other states that has been adopted under the auspices of the World Bank in 1965. And this convention establishes the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, and it promotes the international investment in a more fair environment. The second instrument of international law that I think it's important to refer to it is the New York Convention on the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. This one is relevant either for commercial arbitration or for investment arbitration. So the purpose of this convention is to ensure the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards worldwide. The last but not least is the Mauritius Convention on Transparency, so-called United Nations Convention on Transparency in Treaty-Based Investor-State Arbitration. This one is quite recent. As you can see, so far, through the statistics I've checked, it only has 9 contracting parties. So the purpose is that the parties to investment treaties concluded before 1st April 2014, they expressed their consent to apply the UCITRA rules on transparency in treaty-based investor-state arbitration. Regarding the principles of investment arbitration are not that different or that much different if we look at the general principles of investment arbitration. Maybe the most known is the parties' autonomy, the parties' autonomy with its corollary, as we can see in our slide. I think it's important to go back to the issue on how the state grants its consent to arbitration. If we look, for example, to exit, as mentioned by João Dono, it's not enough the state to be a contracting party of the exit convention. The state has to manifest its consent to arbitration. And how is this consent manifested in case of an international investment agreement? I could say that this one could be the most easy way, because this agreement, this specific agreement that is signed by the investor and the state will generally contain an arbitration clause. If there isn't an arbitration clause, the parties to this investment agreement may conclude or may sign a compromise that will be targeted to the current dispute or disputes that arise in the future. But if you go back and see, for example, how it happens when there is not an investment agreement, where there is not a bilateral investment treaty, we can have the host state legislation, generally the investment legislation, where the state or the host state grants its openness to arbitration, what called as being a general offer to arbitrate that will be manifested or will be materialized by acceptance from the investor. If you look at BIT and MIT, what we see is that the host state and the state of the nationality of the investor, when they conclude, when they sign a BIT, they openness to arbitration. And what will happen is that the investor, when he requests an arbitration proceeding, he will be confirming his acceptance to arbitration. I brought this specific case, which proceedings were recently published, that is related to a case in which Mozambique is involved, and it is related to the issue of consent to arbitrate when it's granted by a state, in this case, Mozambique. Just to give you a general or summary of what happened, in this case, Mozambique confirmed that there was a ratified BIT. However, Mozambique alleged that other steps for the BIT to be enforced were not completed. So due to that, the tribunal, in this case it was ICSID, had to dismiss the case based in the lack of consent. So the lesson we take from this example is that it's not enough to have a BIT. We'll need to see what are the procedures, the internal procedures that are required according to the national legislation for the BIT to be enforced. So this grants a lot of work for lawyers. The second principle is the principle of compétence de la compétence, which is widely known as well. And as we know, this principle contains two corollaries, one positive effect and the other is the negative effect. The positive effect or the negative effect is that if parties have agreed to submit the dispute to arbitration, the national court lacks jurisdiction to judge the specific case. And the negative one is the independence of the tribunal, I mean the arbitration tribunal, to judge on their own competence, irrelevant or irrespective of parties' position or parties' allegation. We see that Article 41, Paragraph 1 of the Exit Convention, it provides that the tribunal shall be the judge of its own competence. If we go back to this case, that Brazilian versus Mozambique, we see that in this case, Mozambique raised a jurisdictional objection 3 years after the constitution of the tribunal. So this jurisdictional objection was raised at a later stage because exit procedures, they say that it must be raised, a jurisdictional objection must be raised at the very beginning of the proceeding. The tribunal effectively considered that Mozambique failed to submit the objection within the time limit. However, the tribunal ruled on its own jurisdiction and concluded that the tribunal had no jurisdiction because the BAT was not enforced. So the lesson we take is that effectively the tribunal in arbitration, they have the power to decide on their own competence. The other principle is the binding effect of the award. I won't take time on this, conscious of time. I just would like to reiterate that if we look at the exit jurisdiction, we have what is called has been the automatic enforcement of an arbitral award, meaning that the national court cannot interfere during the proceedings and after the proceedings. So if this convention provides for specific situations or conditions for the award to be annulled. The last but not least is the principle of transparency, which means that access to arbitration proceedings and information by the public must be available. And what's at stake here, what is at stake is the public interest. I'll be happy to take questions. I'm conscious of time, and I finish my presentation by saying obrigado. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Demetrio. You have been also able to present your case within the time limit that I was forced to provide to each one of you. Now we are having the third speaker on this first team, José de Freitas, and after that, I hope that you have a few minutes for the other members of the panel to put some questions that they think are worthwhile to each one or one of the three speakers. José, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I asked Bruno if he is able to share my PowerPoint, because I have tried to do it from here, but I haven't been succeed.
Just 1 second, I'll try.
Okay.
We have all my solidarity in the issues of technology. I'm always not at ease with that. But thanks God we have Bruno.
Okay. I know.
And I take the opportunity.
But in meanwhile, okay.
Okay, sorry, please. I take the opportunity to inform that one of the participants asked for obtaining the access to the PowerPoint. For sure, Alan, through Bruno, will decide on that, we'll inform accordingly, and then we can proceed with the presentation.
Só um segundo.
Perhaps, if you allow me, you may start.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah.
Enough, I know. And even without the PowerPoint, we will provide us with all the
okay, yes.
For our illumination. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thank you, Miguel. Not to lose time and try to comply with my time frame. First of all, I want to apologize not to approach the team that was allocated to me as the characterization of the investment arbitration as a whole. I was aware that there are other colleagues of the panel that they would approach this subject in a broad way, as we have already listened to two very good presentations. So for a self-interested purpose, I decided to go directly to a sub team, which is the difference between the institutional arbitration and the ad hoc arbitration. The reason why I'm doing this is first because I'm prompted by my duties as a coordinator of the Arbitration Institute of the Oporto Comercial Association, and on the other hand, because I am strongly convicted that the institutional arbitration is the best way to spread and normalize the use of arbitration. I have the greatest respect for ad hoc arbitration, but I believe that many of the reservations and criticisms that are made to arbitration, especially in domestic arbitration, are more related to ad hoc arbitration than to institutional arbitration. As we know, all of us, we are aware, the arbitration procedure is often accused of being not transparent and unpredictable to the parties. Arbitration is accused of being very expensive, and the decisions of arbitration are mostly accused of being very or mostly Solomonic. Let's say that parties feel that they have always something to lose, or that they will never gain the what they think and they feel they are entitled to. And the way that I see to overcome this negative assessment of arbitrations is to entrust the arbitration to suitable institutions with adequate logistical means, clear regulations, and with a clear arbitration policy. And for sure, then this is transversal with the ad hoc, also with competent arbitrators that be committed with the good image of the institution. As I see the institutional arbitration as the or gives a physical reference to the arbitration, which creates accountability, what sometimes is not the idea that the parties have about the arbitration. And pre-existing regulations in institutional arbitration and prefix prices turn it more predictable. Now, directly to my PowerPoint, that is not displayed, but what I mean is to propose the main difference between the institutional and the ad hoc. First of all, the administration. As we know, institutional arbitration is administered by arbitration an arbitration institution, such as the one that was created in 1966, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, the known ICSID, and also the others institutions such as ICC and others. The ad hoc arbitration, on the other hand, is not administered by any institution and is set up by the parties and the arbitrators that are chosen. About the rules in institutional arbitration, the process is governed by the rules of the administering institution, which provide a framework for the arbitration process. In what concerns the ad hoc arbitration, by contrast, there is no a predetermined set of rules, and the parties and the arbitrators must agree on the procedure rules themselves and change the rules in the way or in the course of the proceedings. In the appointment of arbitrators in institutional arbitration, the institution typically provides. Thank you very much. So, maybe page 5, please. Yeah, there we are. As we said, in institutional arbitration, the institution typically provides a list of qualified arbitrators from which the parties can choose their own arbitrators or appoint some external arbitrators. In ad hoc arbitration, the parties, let's say, have more control, or we can say more. That is more or less the same, because even in the ad hoc arbitration, they can choose. They can appoint arbitrators from where the parties want, but they can use also on the arbitrators that are listed in some institutional arbitrations. But one of the difficulties that we can face in this situation is some challenges in finding qualified and impartial arbitrators out of the list of the institutional lists of arbitrations. About costs, normally is it's a common voice that the institutional arbitration is more expensive than the ad hoc arbitration, because the institutions, they charge fees for their own services. But I think that the same may occur or happen with the ad hoc arbitrations, because the ad hoc arbitration is not only performed by the arbitrators, because the arbitrators they need room, they need staff in order to organize all the proceedings, and all of this costs money too. Next time frame. Thank you very much. About the time frame, the difference between the institutional, or the main difference between institutional arbitration and ad hoc arbitration is that institutional arbitration is more likely to respect the deadlines that are in their regulations, and in ad hoc arbitration, the time is more flexible, and the parties tend more to postpone or to delay to delays. In conclusion, I would say that institutional arbitration may be the preferred option for parties that value a more structured and predictable process. And while ad hoc arbitration may be more suitable for parties who want a greater control over the process. And but anyway, it is that for me maybe and for situations and in which the parties are not such as, and we are here talking about the investment arbitration, where the parties are more used to use the arbitration, and they can control and administrate the arbitration by themselves. Only to terminate, to mention some examples of institutions that are commonly used in international investment arbitration. So the next slide, please. I have already mentioned the ICSID that was established by the World Bank in 1966, and specifically for the investment arbitration services. The ICC that I already mentioned is more an institution for commercial arbitration, but it also next, please. It also offers services for the investment arbitration. ICC has created a task, an investment arbitration task force that handles with the investment disputes. We have also the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce that is dedicated to investment.
José, sorry, you need to speak things a little up, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm finishing. So, and the last one, and the last slide is to mention the London Court of International Arbitration and the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague, that all of them they handle with case of investment arbitration following the UNCITAL arbitration rules. So, and it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we have a few minutes for questions to be presented by the other speakers to the three colleagues that took the floor in the first team, and then we will pass to the second team. Any question for any one of you?
Well, I think we have a question in the chat.
Yes, I see you have some questions also for the second part. We have some questions from the participants, and if there is no questions to be presented by the speakers, I will give the floor to one of the three of you to answer to one question, and then we'll see the others. Please give short answers, as you may complete them, putting into the chat a more detailed answer if you think necessary or convenient. Please proceed.
Okay, I think one of the question is for me. They ask which tribunal will recognize the decision. The decision, the award is made by the arbitrator, but then the investor has to enforce the award in the state. So they have to go to the court, national court, and enforce the decision. It's important to say that all the contracting state has to recognize the award as like their own national decision. So it will be easier to enforce this decision of the award taken in the arbitration by ICSID Convention. The ICSID Convention itself regulates all these aspects, and the contracting state is obliged to apply, to recognize, and enforce the award.
Thank you very much, João. Any other questions? Any other answer for any other question from the speakers?
José Miguel, I have a
to put a question or to give an answer?
Yes. No, it's a question to João, connected to the first one. That's why I'm doing now. João, in the case of counterclaims by the state, if the state wins the case in ICSID of a counterclaim, the proceeding for enforcement will be the same that an investor would follow if the investor had won the case, or no? Is there any distinction? Because it is very usual that the investors win the case, but today states are starting to win. And what is the proceeding for enforcement? If it is the same or not?
Okay. No, as you said, normally we think an investor as a winner, but sometimes also the state win the case, and in that case they have some right. So the state has also to ask for a recognition and also to enforcement. They have to just give a tribunal a copy for the award to ask for the recognition and enforcement. So I can say the proceeding is the same under the ICSID Convention.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
If you allow me to give you some insights quickly about this issue.
Please do very quickly.
Okay, so very quickly, I just want to answer the question. The procedure is the same as mentioned by João, but what will happen is that it will be cumbersome for the investor to enforce the decision, trying to attach assets belonging to the state, for example, that are located in the country of this state. What the investor will do is try to enforce and look at assets that are located in other states, and that will be cumbersome as well because there are assets that have an immunity regime. For example, if you look at properties like embassies, but the state, they have other assets that are subjected to normal commercial transactions. Thank you.
Well, before passing to the second team, I will provide three very, very quick notes. First of all, I wish to call the attention that Stockholm Chamber of Commerce is also very active in cases related with Asia, because China, in certain situations, prefer going to Sweden than to other fora for arbitration, commercial arbitration. Second, it is also one of the three entities that are allowed to decide on energy charter arbitration, together with the Permanent Court of Arbitration and ICC. A second point, PCA, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, is very active on international ad hoc arbitration. Actually, it is the best forum for organizing arbitration that has been decided as an ad hoc form and then not through institutional arbitration. Third point, on the New York Convention, somebody was asking for more information. We have not time for that, but I just call your attention for the following. Please go and read the New York Convention, a very short one, And clearly, perhaps not everybody is aware of that. It's much easier to enforce an arbitral award through the New York Convention than a judicial court decision, because there is no convention, no international convention so ample, so able to cover almost all the jurisdictions in the world. Then now we are going to pass to the second theme. It's a very important one also, and this is related to the future of investment arbitration. We have, in a way, the second theme and the third theme are very close, because the third theme relates with details of those reforms. Then, if you agree with me, we are going to give to analyze these two themes at the same time. Then, the future of investment arbitration and some ideas that are being discussed at this stage in different situations or in different fora for reforms that some consider necessary or convenient for having a more efficient, balanced, and fair investment arbitration dispute resolution system. And I give the floor to Christian Carvajal, that is going to provide I would say, the umbrella analysis of this issue. And then we have some detailed analysis made by other members of this panel. Christian, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you. You can hear me, right? Yes.
Very well.
Thank you. I will share the screen. I had some problems now, but I think it will be all right. Can you see?
Very well. Very well.
Excellent. In case I have problems, Bruno, I will ask you some support. Thank you very much first to Alain for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Bruno, for the same, and Jose Miguel for being our moderator. I will talk, as you mentioned, until now, we heard about how the international investment arbitration is today, how it was thought, how it was included in the ICSID convention, how it is regulated. But now I will talk a little bit about how some want it to be, what need of reforms are being discussed. This is a very controversial issue. It's very polemic. There are no single opinions about this. I'm from Peru. I'm a Peruvian lawyer, but I'm based in Brazil. And why I say this, because Brazil has a complete opposite position about investment arbitration if compared with Peruvian position. Peru has a very active role in investment arbitration. It's one of the main Latin American countries involved in arbitration cases. And Brazil has been, for the last decades, completely against, for the reason that I will mention. And Brazil has its own model, which is an alternative to the BITs. I will mention that later. But the main purpose of the main object of my presentation is what is being discussed at UNCITRAL, the United Nations Commission on Trade Law. They gather representatives of states and also from international institutions involved with international law to discuss what has to be done to have a better system of investment resolution, dispute resolution. The critics mainly refer to impartiality. It is said that investment arbitrators are not impartial, are not sufficiently independent. They said that this system lacks celerity. This system is very expensive, as has already been mentioned. And one of the main critics is that this system does not guarantee predictability and coherence of the awards. And also, one issue that is very connected with these proposals of reform is that today investment arbitration, according to this position, limits unfairly the regulatory powers of the states. Here I have to say something. I believe that some of the issues that we will talk are justified. They are really required to be reformed, but some others not necessarily. Some others maybe are more ideological than legal reasoning. The truth is that for the first 3-4 decades of investment arbitration that really started from the 90s until now, the system, the first decades was kind of in favor of investors, was not really balanced. And the initial BITs reflect that. Mm-hmm. These are conventions mainly reflecting the interests of the investors. But that started to change at the beginning of this century, 2000 until now. And today we have free trade agreements with investment chapters, which are much more balanced. And that's the way things are going. In my view, as I said, this is a polemic issue, and my views may be polemic too. But in my view, the investment chapters of the new free trade agreements, which are the ones that today are being negotiated more than the BITs, are much more balanced than the original BITs. So the question is, do we need a gradual reform, or we need a revolution to change completely the system? And what UNCITRAL is doing in certain way to propose a permanent investment tribunal instead of arbitration is in a way a complete change, is a revolution, and we will see at the end of this webinar what is better, at least to change opinions about that. So let's start with the presentation. This José Miguel presentation of this issue of mine is a little bit more, have more issues to discuss than the one that I have at the beginning. So I may take a little bit more minutes. At the beginning, I may talk for 5 minutes.
We have total freedom within the time frame that you need to respect. In a way. Thank you very much.
Sure. The future, the reform of international investment arbitration at UNCITRAL, that's my issue. So since almost 10 years, a little bit less, the United Nations Commission on Trade Law, as I said, has been discussing proposals to reform the system. I already said that. What are the main concerns of UNCITRAL? These are the main concerns and other issues that are in the following slide. Lack of consistency, coherence, and predictability of the awards, of arbitral awards. There have been some awards relating to the same parties, Czech Republic, for example, that had completely different awards. Some may say this is justified because some facts are different, because the BITs involved were different. We will see if it is really justified to take that example to say the system is completely wrong. But the fact is that there is some lack of consistency, coherence, and predictability. Also, I must say, this is not, is to blame precisely the arbitrators, because the international investment law as such is formed by international standards that are ambiguous by themselves. So arbitrators have a freedom to interpret these general investment standards for the protection of investment in a general way, and it's almost natural to have different interpretations and to have at the end awards that seems to be contradictory, but maybe they are not. They are justified by different facts, different BITs, and different interpretations for the arbitrators. Another issue that is a concern for UNCITRAL is concerning arbitrators themselves. It is said that it is not guaranteed the independence and impartiality of the arbitrators, that there is a lack of effectiveness and transparency of the disclosure and challenge mechanisms under current treaties, current system, and there is lack of diversity among arbitrators. And that is true. The lack of diversity, certainly it is true, and the previous also it must be improved. For example, Latin America has more or less 40% of the cases, of the exit cases, 35–40%, but only 10–15 percentage of the arbitrators. So there you see a big inequality. And also Europe has more or less 10% of the cases, but has maybe 40% of the arbitrators, more or less. So yes, there are issues of diversity and also gender, for example, and nationalities. Also a critique of high cost and duration of the cases, very expensive. I was involved in cases against Peru, represented investors. Some of them took 7 years, which is completely against the idea of arbitration. But it is true, it's not most of the cases, that situation. Other issues of concern for UNCITRAL is the promotion of investment mediation, and this is in conformity with the relevance today of the Singapore Convention on International Mediation. And it is true in general, in national internal systems also, mediation is becoming more relevant than it used to be. Also, another issue for UNCITRAL is the issue of exhaustion of local remedies, judicial or administrative remedies before going to arbitration. Also, to improve the participation of third parties, amicus curiae, that I believe some of you, I don't know if Joan or Demetrio talk about amicus curiae. It is true, it's important. Public issues are involved. Third party amicus curiae, they must intervene. It has to do with transparency of the cases. It has to do with the legitimacy of the investment arbitration proceeding. Counterclaims, as I said in the question, today, counterclaims is more relevant than it used to be. States do not start an investment proceeding only to defend themselves, but they come with counterclaims. The question is if the counterclaims are only possible when it is a contract investment arbitration, or it is possible also when it is a BIT or a free trade agreement, investment agreement arbitration. If it is possibility of a counterclaim under a treaty. I believe the tendency will be that, yes, the agreements, international investment agreements, will have rights that the state may use to counterclaim against the investor. Also, one issue that is a big concern is the risk of regulatory chill, which means that international investment arbitration represents a threat to the states to assume their duty to regulate the economy, because any damage, small damage to investors may become an investment arbitration. That's the argument of the states. And calculation of damages are also issues more technical than the others. What are the main proposals from UNCITRAL that come from these critics? The creation of a permanent investment tribunal that would substitute international investment arbitration. As you said, as you know, investment arbitration as it is today, and was mentioned by João and Demetrio, we have specific arbitral tribunals for each case. Each party designates an arbitrator, and normally each seat, or if it is another institution, designates the president. That will change according to this proposal that is being discussed at UNCITRAL and that I participate. They will propose a permanent investment tribunal, like International Justice Court of Justice, permanent, with a seat, with the number of judges is not adjudicators is still not known. It is under discussion. Also, together with this first instant permanent investment tribunal, that will see issues of fact and issues of law, the first one, they are thinking and they're proposing the creation of a review mechanism, an appeal proceeding, an investment court of appeals that will discuss issues of merits, which is today forbidden. Today, there is no appeal proceeding within each seat, within the regular investment proceeding. There are possibilities of appeal in some investment agreements, specific for some two countries that they decided to think about the possibility of an appeal, but not in the general system as such. There's only annulment, which is for formal reasons, corruption, violation of due proceeding. That is today. But what they are proposing is, because there is uncertainty, because there is lack of coherence, because the results are not as expected, we need a review mechanism, we need a court of appeals to review again facts when there are serious mistakes in the facts in the first instance, and to review law, the application of law, and to go into the merits in this proposal of UNCITRAL. This goes a little bit against the initial notion of arbitration, only one instant, but it's true that the possibility of two instances is started to be discussed not only internationally like here, but also in national contexts, at least to leave the parties the freedom to agree in a second instance. And also an issue finally is the arbitrator's code of conduct, because I said one of the critics is the issue of impartiality, independence, etc. of arbitrators. Very quickly about the creation of permanent tribunal. Main supporters, as I said, European Union, that is discussing in UNCITRAL, but would not be limited the tribunal to Europe. Any country may be part of it once it is concluded, the discussions. Canada and Singapore, there are others, but just the big question is if it will be an alternative to the current system, the investor-state dispute settlement system, which is today's arbitration, or if we will substitute it. I understand that UNCITRAL until now has not still an answer. And this is very relevant because if it is a substitution, we may come from a liberal, I think there's we come from a liberal approach, which as it was international investment arbitration, to a more pro-state approach, as I said, as I will explain, which is the permanent tribunal for investment cases. And I don't know if that's correct. What we should look for is for a balanced system, which does not forget the investor interest and does not forget the state's interest. As it is proposed by Europe in UNCITRAL, or by UNCITRAL itself, is a very system. What I believe, this is controversial, I know, a more pro-state system, which could be, we may become at the end in some years again, try to look for balance. What are the main characteristics of this tribunal, the permanent seat? Adjudicator judge will be in full time. They will not have, they will not act as attorneys. They will not have arbitrators. They will be judges just for this tribunal, and probably law professors for sure. I'm not quite sure about that, but I believe it will be allowed. With no outside relevant activities, with salaries compared with those judges of international courts, will be designated only by the states. This is what I was saying. We are coming from critics to a liberal pro-investor, and now we have a system where only the states, so one of the parties in the controversies, designates the future judge. I believe that's a big mistake. A more balanced approach should be reached. And for long,
we have 4 minutes for your first intervention. Okay?
And for and for long periods, and they must be specialized in international public law. I also believe that's a mistake, because international investment law is a mix of international public law, of international private law. I believe that only mentioning international public law again is only emphasizing the state's position. 2 levels of adjudication in the new system: a first instance permanent tribunal that I said will be issues of law, issues of facts, and an appellate court which will see errors of law, merits, errors of law, manifest errors of facts in the appreciation of facts, and what we have today, serious procedural shortcomings, which is corruption, as I said, violation of due process of law, no motivation, not when the tribunal does not state properly the reasons for the award, etc. This appellate court should not undertake a complete and new review of the facts. That should only. This following point is another issue I can talk in my other minutes. Thank you, José Miguel. That's it.
Thank you very much, Christian. This is the core of our panel, I would say, because the first theme was to refresh our memory, and now we are speaking about the future. Then we are going to try to develop some of these issues that are at stake through different practitioners. And probably we will have time enough in the end for Christian to develop a little further some aspects that I didn't allow, so to speak, him to develop at this stage, because I want to be fair, as it is necessary in arbitration, but also in panels about arbitration. Then now I give the floor to Carla Monteiro. She will develop some details and analysis related with this idea of a first instance and appeal court for ISDS, either through a total different system, as explained by Christian, that is at stake, or through some reforms to the usual arbitration system without appeal, just annulment, or what we see in the ad hoc committees that are still very, very distant. Carla, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Miguel.
Oh, sorry, Carla. And she will address also the point of nomination of arbitrators and how to control the interpretation of contracts. As you know, these are the rules of the game. You have between 15 to 20 minutes for presenting all your knowledge, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Miguel. Hi to everybody. I want to thank you, Bruno, for this invitation and opportunity to speak about this issue with some recognized colleague here. I thought that you can see my PowerPoint. That's correct?
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so I will start just to do a contest that the United Nations Commission of International Trade Law, it's the core legal body of the United Nations system in the field of international trade law. So basically, since 2017, some of they have created a working group that it's working in this reform that you are talking about today. This working group is crucial for the future of the international investment regime, being the only forum on this ISDS reform with a global reach. The section of taking place while several countries and regions are developing new approaches to disputes, settlement and prevention, as well as negotiating alternatives type of treaties and renegotiated or terminated existing ones. So I will present today some of these new approaches. I will start with these two kinds of arbitration courts. A multilateral investment tribunal is composed for the first instance and the appeal level. The decision by the first-tier tribunal includes an arbitrator tribunal constituted to resolve an international investment dispute, as well as the first-tier tribunal investment in the stating mechanism. So basically, we have the first-tier tribunal for the first instance, and then each party that loses the case can appeal. And Christian have already explained some part of this, and I will give my own view on this part as well. So basically, regarding this appellate mechanism, the working group may wish to confirm that the scope of appeal should not be limited to the final decisions, allowing for appeals of decision handled prior to the final decision would ensure that the effectiveness of the first-tier process, since the disputing parties will not have to wait until the conclusion of the proceedings to raise an appeal. The working group may wish also consider the impact that such an appeal would have on ongoing first-tier proceeding. On the other hand, limiting the scope of appeal to final decisions would ensure that the appellate tribunal would have the full record of the case to review when handling its decision. So basically, if the scope of appeal is non-final decision, there may be needs to exclude certain type of decision, such as procedural orders, decisions on the interim measure, decisions on bifurcation, or decision on challenge. While such decision would generally not be considered decision on jurisdiction or on the merits, the working group may wish to release such decision for clarify proposed. The working group may also wish to consider if a decision by an arbitrator tribunal declining its jurisdiction should be subject to appeal, considering the consequence of a possible reversal by an appeal tribunal. So on the other hand, we can check basically the two mechanism appellate tribunal that is discussed at this moment. One of them is ad hoc appellate mechanism. The other one is standing multilateral mechanism. So the first one, an appellated tribunal constituted by the disputing parties on a case-by-case basis, following the pattern on the constitution of first-tier tribunals in the current ISDS framework. The second one, it's the stating multilateral mechanism as a stand-alone body to complement the current ISDS framework, or as a second tier of a standing mechanism consisting of both a first tier and a second tier. So basically, this is the two possibility that they are discussed. Now we have we will discuss about the selection and appointment of arbitrator. So basically, this is an issue that it's also on the table to reform or to discuss if the currently model is correct or it's better to proceed or to keep in this reform. So now we have basically two main models on this, that basically the arbitrators being established by the disputing parties for a specific dispute. After the dispute has arisen, this model corresponds to the current ISDS regime based on international arbitration. And they have the second main models that is in place at this time, that the arbitrated body pre-existing the dispute. So basically, they decided who is the arbitrated selects and appoint before have this dispute, basically. And now this working group is discussing the reform solution that includes the regulation of party appointment mechanism or a pre-established list of Huster, either in the current arbitration framework, possibility involving institutes, or a part of a semi-permanent adjudicative body, or also to creation of standing mechanism. At this moment, also it's possible to appoint an authority to select and appoint the arbitrated, and they can, for example, decided for an authority, international authority, and then this authority can, in a specific dispute, list a list of arbitrated. Then the parties can decide for one or for three in this case. So basically, on the conclusion on this, we can say that the selection and appointment methods under any reform option should guarantee transparency and openness. The criteria, it's all options should be such that they ensure the selection of members of ISDS tribunals that are independent, impartial, competent, with the expertise and experience necessary to discharge their function. So basically, any of the models that can be decided on this reform should go on this criteria. So basically, to make sure that the arbitrated selected will be independent, impartial, competent, they will have the expertise, experience to do their own function. Then we will also speak about the mechanism of control of the interpretation of investment treaties. So basically, currently, many investment treaties contain a clause on their applicable law. The working group may wish to consider issues related to the law to be applied by the tribunal. So basically, many investment have this clause, because this clause generally refers to the treaty itself and international law. However, the agreement establishing the tribunal could provide for a rule on the applicable law in case of absence of choice of law in the underlying treaty, investment law, or contracts. In order to develop more consistent practice of the interpretation of investment treaties, the multilateral investment tribunal could provide for treaty interpretation tools, in particular for joint interpretative statements, which could be binding for the tribunal. It may be noted that treaty interpretation is discussed by this working group as well as a separate reform solution. The working group may wish to consider also if it should be provided expressly that the interpretation to be made by tribunal members is done in the accordance of customary rules of interpretation of public international law, following, for example, what is in the dispute settlement understanding of the HERS organization. The working group may wish to consider if a provision should be added to allow the tribunal to decide that embodied or full composition when presented with an issue of systematic relevance. That is then an issue to the resolution of which may have repercussion for the investment treaty regime as all a new legal question never addressed before, or a divergence of interpretation in the case law of the different chambers, or the intention to depart from an established line of cases. So basically, in this case, the suggestion or the mechanism should be provided in the form of a model treaty provision or a multilateral stating mechanism. Basically, treaty parties could jointly determine the law or principle of interpretation to be used by ISDS, so as the ensuring that the treaty should be interpreted as intended by the parties. This is called joint interpretative commitment. Arbitral tribunals should be able to consult states authorities on the arbitration in case of doubt. The document regarding treaties interpretation should be published. So basically, this is the suggestions that are in discussion at this moment. To conclude these items, we said that the rigorous application of interpretation rules by ISDS tribunals contributes to legal predictability and protects the expectation of treaty parties on how treaties will be interpreted. On this, we want also to present some information about Cape Verde on this international investment arbitration. Basically, Cape Verde signed and ratify the ICSID convention in 2010. Also, Cape Verde is part of the New York Convention from 2017, and Cape Verde signed several bilateral investment treaties since 1997, like with Germany, Portugal, Switzerland, Netherlands, Cuba, Angola, China, Mauritius, and Hungary. Basically, this bilateral investment treaty is signed and enforced in Cape Verde at this moment, but we also have some others that Cape Verde signed, but it's not enforced at this time. But we hope that in the future can be enforced, like with São Tomé and Príncipe, Equatorial Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Italy. So these BITs are signed Italy in 1997, Guinea-Bissau in 2015, Equatorial Guinea in 2019, and São Tomé and Príncipe also in 2019. So we hope that we can, in a future, have these BITs in place, because as we already explained here, the other colleagues already explained, it's very important to have these treaties between the countries, and Cape Verde is a country that our main activity it's tourism. So to have this treaty between the countries in Cape Verde and the countries that normally invest in Cape Verde should be protect the investment and of course allow them to go to the arbitration tribunal, investment arbitration tribunal, and then if they have awards, they can enforce in Cape Verde as well, because we have the local law of arbitration, and also can put this clause in the contracts, and they can recognize these awards in Cape Verde and enforce it in Cape Verde as well. So basically, this is my presentation, and thank you for your time, and I'm aware for questions.
Thank you very much, Carla. As all the others, we have been very clear, outstanding, and within the time frame. Now we are having Eduardo Buisson. Is not coming from the dark side of the force, you can be sure, even if we don't see him, but just a black panel. Eduardo, you have the floor, and you are going to address mostly the financing of arbitration by third parties. Eduardo, are you there? Oops, I'm not sure whether Eduardo is there. Bruno, do you know whether Eduardo is available, or you have some kind of problem that you need to find the okay, it's already here. Now, Eduardo, you may start at your convenience and as soon as possible, needless to say.
Eduardo may have the
Can you
micro.
can you hear me?
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah, now okay. So there's been some problems with this computer. It's uncooperative at all.
But you know, I already informed that you are not coming from the dark side of the force. It is not your image, but you are a very decent fellow. Please proceed.
And I'm not an AI robot here speaking. Okay. Let's start with this. I cannot have some mistakes in this PowerPoint, but I cannot repair, and it's better that I start now than this going down again. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm going to speak about third-party funding. And third-party funding happens because it's a question issue of access to justice. The amounts at stake in this kind of investment arbitration can be at such a level, such an astronomical level, that it's hard either for states or for investors to have the necessary resources to face this kind of disputes. Okay. Now, third-party investment arbitration funding, as in a definition, a short definition, is the financing of the costs of investment arbitration cases for one party of the dispute in exchange for participation or percentage ranging from 30% to 50% in the proceeds, if the case is a success for the funded party. This range between 30% to 50%, but is difficult to know exactly which is the amount, but it is thought that is between this range, because these agreements signed by the third-party funders and the party that receives this fund are mainly confidential, and nobody is not open. There is not even a template out there about this. So the parties in dispute, as I said, are sovereign nations and foreign investors. They can deal with a number of international investment treaties, BITs and FTAs, more than 3,000. The main international investment arbitrations hosting is done by the IC, SID, and UNCITRAL, about 90%. Historically, third-party funding was only for parties who could not afford the costs for access to justice. But more recently, it also began to be sort of balancing the books for companies that don't want to use all their cash to fund some dispute. So it evolved now. And but there was a problem. There was a problem that either for the common law jurisdictions and civil law jurisdictions, there was traditionally a prohibition of this kind of things. In common law jurisdictions, this third-party funding would constitute a violation of maintenance and champerty. Later I can explain this. What is this? In civil law jurisdictions, there is a prohibition of contingency fee agreements. So not all the countries accept this. Is a subject that is under evolution and open for agreement and disagreement, and is extremely complex and not so easy to understand at the first glance. As I said, this is an issue of access to justice. So there are four key issues raised by third-party investment arbitration funding. Issue one is potential conflicts of interest due to the participation of a third party financing an arbitration party. Issue number two, the consequences in the jurisdiction of investment arbitration tribunals. 3, security for costs. 4, disclosure requirements. So these 4 will be developed now one by one. The case that I call the quintessential case is when an individual is in any way connected with a third-party funder. For example, there are members of investment advisory panels inside these third-party funders that are companies. One of them is even listed in the stock exchange, in New York Stock Exchange, and I don't mention the name because there are others also on the way to be. And this individual is also an arbitrator in a case financed by the same third-party funder. So it's a confusion of functions that can lead to a conflict of interest. And then there was a group, a task force created called the ICCA Queen Mary Task Force on Third-Party Funding in International Arbitration that referred as reasons for this conflict of interest the following items. There is an increase in the number of cases where third-party funding exists. There is a highly concentrated segment of the funding industry that is also increasing the number of companies that are in this type of business. There is also a symbiotic relationship between funders and a small group of law firms, and an often close relations among elite law firms and leading arbitrators. So it's a small segment, albeit increasing, but it's a small segment, and many know each other. This leads to know each other and have cross positions in the respective institutions. So this leads for a potential conflict of interest. So in the IBA, International Bar Association, they adopted guidelines on conflicts of interest in October 23, 2014, in which the general standard 6 sub B says the following: if one of the parties is a legal entity, any legal or physical having a controlling influence on the legal entity, or a direct economic interest in, or a duty to indemnify a party for the award to be rendered in the arbitration, may be considered to bear the identity of such party. Can be, this means there is a confusion of functions. There is first one party and there is another behind it that in fact controls many things. There were some cases in which this issue was raised but solved after it was found that there was no conflict of interest. I mentioned these cases, I don't have to repeat here, but there are more, but these are some examples. Now to the issue, another key issue of jurisdiction. Due to the fact that the third-party funding constitutes an interest in the claim, this can affect the jurisdiction of an arbitral tribunal in terms of ratione persona, since the claimant can effectively no longer own the claim. An assignment of the claim possibly has occurred, de jure, when there is an express clause in the financing agreement, or de facto when the financing agreement allows for a high degree of control for the third-party funding. Like the right to approve the filing of a claim, influence the choice of counsel and expert witnesses, approve counsel bills, even the right to approve settlement agreements, in the fact that the third-party funder may decide to terminate the claim or the funding at any time. In some agreements, in some others, there is a higher negotiating power from the funded party. It's different. When provided that there was an assignment of the claim, what happens to the jurisdiction of an arbitration tribunal? Now we go to international law. There is a principle of international law that distinguishes a beneficial owner of a claim from the nominal owner of a claim, only granting standing and relief to the former, to the beneficial owner, not to the latter one. This led, for example, to the partial annulment of award, the award in a ICSID case with the name Occidental Petroleum Corporation against the Republic of Ecuador. Another general principle of international investment law connected with the above referred states that claimants can only submit their own claims for their own benefit, not on behalf of third parties uncovered by the applicable treaty. A tribunal will be exceeding its jurisdiction if grant compensation to third parties in that situation, because in fact it's the beneficial owner that wins the case if it happens. And another principle of investment treaty arbitration states that tribunals can only adjudicate claims of investors that hold the nationality of one of the contracting parties to the treaty. So now you can see the third-party funders can have the nationality, can have another nationality, and then there is an exogenous element coming to the dispute. If the third-party funder doesn't have the same nationality as the claimant, here we have to distinguish two situations: whether the transfer of the claimant's interest from the claimants, the party in the dispute, to a third-party funder occurred prior to the commencement of the arbitration or occurred after that moment. If occurs prior, it affects the jurisdiction because the funded party ceased to hold any legal position in the claim. If it occurs after, it doesn't, because it is a situation similar to obtaining a corporate loan and using the amounts received with award to reimburse the loan. So now we go to another issue, that is security for costs. Security for costs, I put here two definitions in order to make it easy to understand this. And for one, according to one definition, it is a form of provisional relief that requires one party or both parties to post security to cover the likely amounts that would be awarded to the counterparty in the event that it prevails in the arbitration and is entitled to recover its legal costs. Or an order that requires the claimant to provide security in a certain amount in order to preserve the respondent's ability to recover its legal costs should the claim be dismissed and such costs awarded. Is to avoid situations, for example, in there is insolvency, total insolvency, or lack of any resources to pay in case of losing the case, in case of losing the arbitration. The reasons a claimant choose third-party funding are one of the two. Either it doesn't have enough financial resources to finance the case, or has, but prefers to outsource, to use a kind of credit to keep liquidity in its balance books, as I said in the beginning. For the respondent, it has to prevent a non-compliance to the costs award. The security for costs is meant to prevent a non-compliance with the costs award. So now a question: a tribunal has the power to issue such an order? In general, tribunals have the power to order provisional measures, and this also includes security for costs. And there are some rules that I mentioned here, and there is one more rule in the ICSID arbitration rules number 39 in which it says, at any time after the institution of the proceeding, a party may request that provisional measures for the preservation of its rights be recommended by the tribunal. The request shall specify the rights to be preserved, the measures for recommendation of which are requested, and the circumstances that require such measures. Can this be considered a mere expectation? Security for costs, like a provisional measure, aims at safeguarding rights that exist and also rights that will exist to enforce a future award. Additionally, it should be taken into account that a third-party funder can withdraw its support at any time. And this happened quite a few times, if not in many. Sorry, just a moment.
Eduardo, please, we are approaching the 15 minutes. And
okay.
I will give you some 15 minutes more. And as with Christian, if you have more time in the end, you might return to some of your slides.
Okay. So I do 2 more slides, is possible?
Okay, no problem. More 3 or 4 minutes without any.
Okay. Now, continuing security for costs. In funding agreements, there can be provisions excluding the payment of costs awarded by the third-party funder in case of failure. And there was some cases of rejection of security for costs order for reasons it was a financing on itself doesn't equal risk of non-payment, and issuing security for costs may lead to a blocking of legitimate claims. And there are some cases about this, so I can pass to another important point. Another important point of the key main issues is disclosure. The issue here is to know whether at what extent third-party funding agreements should be disclosed. And this was my problem because I couldn't find a single one out there. I had to imagine, do some reverse thinking, almost reverse engineering to discover some of the clauses that are in the agreements or that I think are in the agreement. For example, conflicts of interest. It is considered generally as a best practice that the claimant should automatically disclose any third-party funding agreement, including its identity, to assure that the independence of the arbitrator rests unassailed. This calls for the respect of principles of independence and impartiality. There are some guidelines from IBA and from ICC. Security for costs. Here, the most relevant aspect is whether the third-party funding is liable to pay an adverse costs order against the claimant and the conditions under which the third-party funder can cease to fund the claimant. Also another case, in one case, the disclosure was ordered. In another, was denied. And then also in disclosure in terms of jurisdiction. In that case, Sehil against Turkmenistan, a disclosure was ordered to identify the true party to the case. And there are additional issues to consider in terms of disclosure. There should be a partial or entire disclosure of third-party funding agreement, in which there is one case, and there was it was decided should be an entire disclosure, or the third-party funding agreement is privileged, is a privileged document. Then it can be redacted, so some parts omitted, to avoid disclosing information that gives tactical advantage to the other party. I think that this one, if I can give to finalize this part because I don't have more time. Factors that lead to a funding decision. The third-party funders have some criteria that they apply to any request for funding. That is not automatic. Of course, they deny many and they accept one. It is said that they accept 1 out of 10. But I'm not sure, I'm not there. So there are the factors that lead to a funding decision are, for example, the present value of expected return, the possibility of a claimed success, at least 70%, easier to predict than in commercial arbitration because investment awards are often made public. But there is no regime of stare decisis. This is more connected with the arbitrators from the common law systems. And so as they don't have decided cases, they say that only basing a decision on treaty standards can be somewhat vague. Also, another item is the amount of recovery, the potential. It costs about, in general, it is said that about 5 million to finance an investor arbitration claim, which means that the damages must at least be in the range of 30 to 40 million to make the claim financially feasible for a third-party funder. Also, the prospects of recovery in the event of a successful outcome, the level of investment required to secure the expected realistic claim value, the level of experience of the legal team, from the funded party, the expected duration up to 2.5 years, and the mitigation of risk by way of having a portfolio of cases. They spread the risk. It is said that is a perspective like the oil, gas, search and drilling companies. So they spread the risk because there are cases that reach astronomical proportions. One of the cases was decided in 2014. It was the UCOS arbitration case, and this they awarded $50 billion in damages, legal fees of $60 million and costs of $5.6 million. In another one, just to finish, involves Nigeria and a British Virgin Islands based company. There was allegations by Nigeria that there was a bribery. There were bribery allegations from against this company, and then this case is still went for arbitration. They refused to follow the arbitration. Is in court now, and this involves $11 billion. This if this company receives or is awarded this amount, it will have about 30% of the entire foreign reserves of Nigeria. But not all cases are this astronomical, but they are indeed quite sizable amounts. I think I stop now because otherwise.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Sorry for.
No problem. Because I cannot shorten. This is lots of information.
Just a small remark. I would do to have access to your presentation would be wonderful for me if it was before Buracachi, because I was the president of that tribunal. It was the first international arena. It was very difficult to analyze. In the end of the day, we decided in accordance to what the parties were expecting. I'm not going to develop that further, but I remember how difficult it was for us, for the three members of the panel, to address an issue that nobody was aware of that in 2010 or 2011. Well, now I give the floor once more to Christian to present the last notes about multilateral issues, and therefore I think you may have some minutes spared for you to return before we open to the other members of the panel and the participants. Please proceed.
Thank you. Let me open again the document. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay. Can you see?
Yes.
I will not talk about the appellate court because it has already been mentioned by Carla. So it's better to go on because of time. I would like to talk, if you allow me, about, and this is not outside of our issue of today. It's very relevant because Brazil is participating as the other countries in the Group 3 of UNCITRAL, and Brazil is against, as I said, investment arbitration, and Brazil approached it with its own system and expresses its view with its own system within UNCITRAL. And I want to mention a little bit very fast what are the main characteristics of this system of Brazil. Critics is very similar. investment arbitration imposes discrimination against national investors.
You may pass these critics because you spoke of them already.
Yeah,
They're
but
not brand new, I would say.
I have some issues here. For example, the Brazilian position of violation of national sovereignty. This is 70s position. It's quite outside of time. Well, the third one, investor arbitration, does not offer a stable, correct, and unpredictable framework. It's true, we already talked about that. This is the model of Brazil, which is opposed to traditional BATs, based in the model of South Korean experience with the Office of Foreign Investment Ombudsman. It focused Brazil in dispute prevention, basically negotiation, facilitation, and mediation. The role of an internal Brazilian agency, which will hear the investor and try to reach an agreement in a prevention pre-formal controversy within the country. Also, in what refers to the substantive issues, the Brazilian model excludes fair and equitable treatment and excludes indirect expropriation and maintains national treatment and non-discrimination. As we know, many of the cases, investment cases, refer to fair and equitable treatment and direct expropriation. I believe excluding them at all, it's a very pro-state approach. Again, I say it. Here's the system. Basically, a facilitator, internal governmental support. If it doesn't work within the country, a joint committee, which is formed by representatives of both the states, agencies of both the states. Also, it's important to say what is relevant, the position of Brazil, because here in this room, we have many representatives of Africa, and basically the Brazilian conventions, ACFIS or CFEA in English, have been signed with African countries. So it's quite relevant what is going to happen with this model. The model of Brazil, if there is no success, it is allowed arbitration, yes, international arbitration, but only between the states. And the states will decide if these arbitrations go on, and obviously political, diplomatic forces and interests may prevail over the legal, juridical issues of the investor. So the investor is until that moment without enough protection from the state. And also, if an international arbitration between the states go on, compensation in favor of the investor is also exceptional. Only if the states agree to give power to the tribunal to decide on compensation. So this is like the last possibility that the investors have to receive compensation. And the model of Brazil is very based in the WTO agreement, the dispute resolution of WTO, where the main objective is to put, according to the agreement, the measure of the state that may be far away from what the agreement wants. So it's not to compensate, but to correct what is wrong, but not to compensate the investor. It's basically that. And I have a final issue, 2 minutes. It's what refers to the implementation of these reforms. It is not still decided if this will be a compulsory, the permanent tribunal will be compulsory for the states, or if it will be an alternative. What I mean with an alternative, what I believe will be more, will be better, to have the permanent body, the standing tribunal, and to have international arbitration, and to improve international investment arbitration, yes, for sure, but to have both systems. And at the end of the day, the market, the investor, and the state for each specific controversy decides which one works better, and maybe one of them will not be used anymore, and the other will be. I believe that changing completely the system could be a mistake, especially because as it is, in my opinion, which could be controversial, is more pro-state than balanced. That's it, Jose Miguel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian. Now we have 20 minutes, more or less, for two tiers of peers. First of all, to have other members of the panel to address issues to those that have. And secondly, to open the floor for participants that may present in a written form some questions. And I will make some final remarks, taking not more than 5 minutes, for 2 or 3 ideas that I, using my power, will try to pass to all of you in the end of our interesting panel. Now, then, members of the panel, have you questions related to the reform or evolution that is being addressed related to ISDS?
I have a question.
Please proceed.
Christian and Carl, do you think that for a country like our country, Angola and Cape Verde, that depends so much from the investment, from the foreign investment, this reform can be a risk that can make the investor stop some investment in country like ours, or do you think that this reform will not affect and the investor will continue to invest in the country like Angola, Cabo Verde, Moçambique, and other?
Yes, Carla, you first.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So basically, João, I think that this cannot be an issue because Cape Verde have the local law protecting investment because, as I said, most of our economy it's tourism and foreign investment. But also, I think that this reform could be a good thing for the investment because Cape Verde already signed the convention, but basically we are not aware of so many cases or any cases that the investor have done an arbitration investment case against the state. So basically, I think that if this reform it's used to regulated and better regulated this arbitration and allow investor to use this way of discussing disputes could be easier for the environment, business environment in Cape Verde, because you know that the normal courts have, they take so long and some investment stopped here because the court disputes. So I believe that the arbitration investment reform, it's good and provide good solutions. Could be something that the investor can look at from now.
Yes, let me just say some additional ideas. Yes, it's difficult to talk about the future, but I believe that may be a problem. Yes. Because of the structure of the new system, I understand, Joan, that your question refers if this new system with a permanent investment tribunal, right? I believe that the structure where only the states who designate the judges were only at least at the beginning, it was said that it would be 15 judges and 6 members of the courts of appeals. We have 350 cases, more or less, new cases in each, only in each seat. 6 people to decide on how many appeals we have, I'm sure that everybody will initiate an appeal proceeding because it's a new instance. So we will have so many cases for 6 people. That's crazy. Obviously, that will delay the cases. That will be an issue to be worried by the investors and also by the states when they are claimants. Also by the states when they are claimants. But by now it's the minority of cases, but also by the states. So I believe, Carla, I think, again, we come from a very pro-investor system that has been changing during the last 15 years. The free trade agreements that started to be signed in 2000 on recognized that there was a need to make reforms, and they are doing the reforms. But the idea of at least from a legal point of view, not political point of view, is to have a balance. And I believe that the permanent tribunal is forgetting the idea of a balance. I mean, it's going to the other side. Small things like saying the judge must have a specialization in international public law, which is really a need, and not in international private law and international commercial law, which is also part of the controversy. That only thing is you see like a perspective for one of the side of in the controversy. So you see here, well, it's basically I had some ideas, but we are against time. I think there's a risk. And finally, John, let me finish. It is true that the research, the studies today about what is the impact of investment treaties and the impact of investment arbitration in the flow of investment, there's no agreement. The truth is that nobody says that investment agreements and investment arbitration makes investment to go down. No, the discrepancy is it remains the same or goes up. So I believe that this new very important thing of investment resolution with a permanent tribunal like judge, yes, it may at least at the beginning stop a little bit investment until investors see how it works. That's what I said, that to have both alternatives would be the healthy thing. I mean, it would be much better to have both alternatives. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
Will not be in same position.
Okay, then we don't need your opinion once more because you agree. Thank you. Other questions from the members of the panel?
I have one.
Okay, please proceed, please.
This is I really had two, but I know there is no time. Carla, the question I had is that it's concerning it's to provoke controversy, right? To generate debate, because that's the idea. The interpretation of treaties only by the states, which is also true in the investment agreements already is like that. The states interpret it. But what I'm worried is that because international investment law is made by standards. The standards by themselves have some subjectivity, and this is not necessarily bad to have some degree of it for interpretation by the arbitrators. And to have these interpretations from the states that could even correct the interpretation from the arbitrators, as you said in your speech, is not a risky situation. It's not a limitation on the autonomy of the judges or the arbitrators or whatever. Could not be a political issue coming into the juridical analysis. It's just what do you think about that?
Well, Carla, please proceed with your comments or your opinions, if any.
Okay, thank you. Christian, indeed, I agree with you, because this is one of the options that they look for. But indeed, in first thing, the state, it's a party of the dispute in the first instance. And the second one, of course, if we know this separation of power. So I believe that indeed this is not the best mechanism, the best way. I believe that we must be flexible, and basically the judge and the tribunal can have their own idea, but they have to look at the parties' intention. Okay, the both party intentions when they do the contracts and they sign basically the relationship. So I really agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions from the members of the panel? Well, then I'm going to make 2 or 3 remarks that in a way are also questions. They are basically based in my experience in this field of practice. First of all, in all the arbitrations in which I appear as chairman, and in investment arbitration I have always been chairman, I found that the arbitrators are, I would say, balanced. Needless to say that when you have states against private investors or vice versa, there is a trend of nominating co-arbitrators that are more prepared to illuminate the point of view of one of the parties than to illuminate the point of view of the other party. But that's part of the system. And my experience with a number of leading practitioners as arbitrators, as co-arbitrators, is that they are clearly partial. And that's very important. I had decisions in which we have decided unanimously in favor of the state, 100%. Unanimously in the, not 100%, but a high percentage of the release thought in favor of the investor. I had cases in which one of the arbitrators dissented, and I have even a case in which one of the arbitrators dissented in some aspects and the other dissented in others. But in the end of the day, I think that out of my lack of qualities, that's for sure a problem, but out of that, I think final decision was fair and accepted in good faith by both parties. The second point, the issues of regulatory limits to the state. I always remember that Cleopatra killed the messenger that brought her a defeat in a war. The problem with this kind of claims are related with bad drafting, bad negotiating, and lack of attention by the state to clarify in the BITs what they are prepared to admit. Then it's clearly possible to have BIT under which regulatory powers might be applied, and clearly they are applied nowadays. And therefore, this is important to take into account. Don't kill the messenger because you won't find a solution for the war. Third point, reforms are clearly necessary. There is no legal system made by man, and I assume by CPD, that is perfect. And therefore, the world is a changing entity, and clearly to adapt, to amend, to take advantage of the experience is clearly very important. But there is an old say that I always remember when we are speaking of reforms and even more evolution. Please don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. This system has flaws, but what? Then all the reforms need to be taken into account. And final note. I had a case, exit case, as chairman also, in which amicus curiae were allowed to appear and to present their own points of view. It was not exactly the classic amicus curiae situation, but the system already allows for it. But some regulatory aspects to clarify how and when amicus curiae might appear might be a good idea, not for a good decision, but for one very important aspect of the legal system, acceptance by the community. The openness to amicus curiae increases the capacity of having people accepting better an international tribunal decision than without that. Now, for the last 8 minutes, I give the floor to members of the participants who have no question at this stage, and also for a second turn for the participants. If not is the case, Eduardo, you have 5 minutes to close your so interesting remarks.
Okay, just a moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear? Yeah, because yeah. Actually, the conditions are becoming more and more confusing in this computer. I would like to say, for example, let me see, let me share again, if possible. Can you see?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. So this one was done already. Continuing that the factors that now is about another thing, is the a third-party funding agreement content, what they should have. I should say and repeat that I didn't saw one, but I know what they have because I talked with some persons and they always say the same. And anyway, this is out of experience of what an agreement of this kind should have. For example, in the responsible private funding of litigation, European Parliament resolution of 13 September 2022, from some months ago, with recommendations to the Commission on responsible private funding of litigation, they said on Article 12, the content of third-party funding agreements, in this content, member states shall ensure that third-party funding agreements are required to be provided in writing in one of the official languages. This is plain, and there is no problem, in which the claimant and intended beneficiaries are resident and presented in a clear and easy comprehensible manner, and includes, as a minimum, for example, the different costs and expenses that the litigation funder will cover, the share of any award or fees that will be paid to the litigation funder or any third party, or any other financial costs be borne directly or indirectly by the claimants, the intended beneficiaries, or both. Also a reference to the responsibility of the litigation funder as regards adverse costs in accordance with Article 18 of this directive. This is not a directive, will be a directive if approved. And D, a clause specifying that any awards from which the fees of the funder are deductible will be paid in full, first to the claimants, who may then subsequently pay any agreed sums to litigation funders as fees or commission, retaining at least the minimum amounts providing for in this directive, and the risks that the claimants, intended beneficiaries, or both are assuming, including, for example, the scope for escalating costs in the litigation, because it can happen, and how that impacts the financial interests of the claimants, beneficiaries, or both. And also the strictly defined circumstances in which the third-party funding agreement can be terminated, and the risks to claimants, beneficiaries, or both in that scenario. Even if I didn't saw an agreement, I was told by some persons that this clause or this part is usually vague or is extremely complex, leading to a situation in which it's impossible to understand clearly what is this there. And it is said in the legislative drafting, which includes legal documents like a contract, that anything over, in English, over 20 words can lead to at least 3 different interpretations. That's why there is a movement to create a more plain language in legislation and in contracts, and extensive paragraphs with lots of relative clauses leads to many possible interpretations, and this can be used and is used by a third-party funder when wants to terminate the agreement because they see the direction in which the claim is going, failure. So they terminate and go. And any potential risk of having to pay adverse costs, including circumstances in which adverse costs insurance or indemnities may not cover such exposure. Related to this, there are other ways of funding dispute. There is, for example, some companies do insurance, and this has two. This is used more in litigation risk insurance, but this is moving also to arbitration very soon. And there are two types. One is adverse judgment insurance. That is a tool that is designed to protect the defendant or other intended beneficiary in the event of an adverse judgment. It has been used more frequently in mergers and acquisitions. And the another one is the judgment preservation insurance. Is designed to underwrite the risk associated with the judgment being overturned or significantly decreased on appeal. This has lots of accounts to do, but it's simple when you see the accounting, but no time to do now. But there are two other ways of a third-party fund to fund a dispute. In what can be called as almost a shadow claimer, because it's behind many claims. So now moving to the...
Well, Eduardo, I think I'm moved by your quality of your presentation, but we have clearly time constraints.
Yes.
I
Understand. Perfect.
If you are kind enough to allow Alan to share your PowerPoint with participants. So clear that will be really helpful. And
yes.
Why not in the future, Alan may address in a specific webinar very important third-party funding issue, because for jurisdictions in which the companies are not very, very wealthy, I'm speaking of Portuguese-speaking countries, that might be an opportunity for them to have access to justice when they think, right or wrong, that they are suffering huge loss. That's the end for me. I give the floor to Bruno because he deserves and needs to put an end to this very interesting webinar. And Bruno, thank you very much once more for giving me the opportunity to share and to assist and to be illuminated by this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
José Miguel, all the panel members, thank you so much. And of course, to our participants, we will be circulating the presentations with the permission of the panel members to all the registrants into this webinar. We had, last count was 190 persons registered to this webinar. And now, following our usual practice, we will upload the recording into YouTube and of course make a publication out of this webinar in the following month or so. There will be additional webinars regarding this topic, and again, thank you very much for your time today and your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.
Obrigado a todos e boa tarde a todos. Bye.
Bye.
Perto português, obrigado.
Obrigado. Thank you.
Obrigada.
Share.
Thank you, Bruno. Obrigado, Bruno.
Obrigada, Bruno.